a lot of people are hearing about it for the first time because of Billy Carson, which is
Exactly.
funny.
Yeah.
Like my friend, I told him about the Anunnaki. Well, first of all, I was just in conversation with him about the Anunnaki. He was like, "What's that?" I'm like, "Dude, you don't know the Anunnaki?" And he had no idea. And then I sent him
Well,
the Billy Carson video, and he's like, "Wow, now I know." I'm like, "Yeah, now you know. I've known about this for like 10 years, dude."
yeah, right.
And I think that's happening to a lot of people. They're just they're starting to get a glimpse into the reality that I've been living in for the past 10 years. Of that we might have been genetically
Yeah,
manipulated.
right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Legacy YouTube channel, the planetary headquarters for all of your celestial information. You are now tuned into another episode of the Forbidden Scrolls, where we analyze all the obscure texts that you should not be reading, or should you be reading. We are going to go over a pretty hot topic right now, the story of the Anunnaki. Um, with all of the talk going around on social media about, the Billy Carson, how he just went on Joe Rogan, breaking down the Sumerian tablets and how these creation stories talk about the sons of God coming down and mating with the daughters of men. We recognize that from the Bible. We recognize that a lot of the Bible is taken directly from these Sumerian tablets that talk about these beings who come from the stars, and they're referred to as the Anunnaki. Um, if you've never heard about that, go take a look. We'll be talking about it in different episodes. If you do know what we're talking about, then I think you'd be very interested in this specific paper, this specific book. It's called the Urantia Book. We talk about it a lot on my channel, but this is specifically paper 66, The Planetary Prince of Urantia. So, to give a little synopsis, a little quick overview, periodically celestial beings land on our planet over time, say 500,000 years, a million years. Every X amount of time, a celestial being will incarnate or land on our planet to teach us humans how to, advance society scientifically, physically, spiritually, all that good stuff. Jesus Christ was one of these. Adam and Eve were some of these beings. A person named Melchizedek, who taught Abraham in the Old Testament, was one of these beings. And the first of these beings was a person named Caligastia. And he was known as the Planetary Prince. And he came with a staff of other celestial beings, 100 staff members that are also from the stars. This correlates with the story of the Anunnaki in the Sumerian tablets. Anu was the sky prince, the heavenly prince, the king prince. That's the translation from the Sumerian cuneiform. So Anu was the sky father, the sky prince. That's the rough translation. And then the Anu, that's him, and the Naki, where I think the translation is princely staff, heavenly staff. So Anu Naki is the 100 princely staff of Anu, the Sky Father, right? And this is what the Urantia. But when I heard Billy Carson reading the Sumerian tablets, I was blown away because it was the most accurate depiction of what really happened I've ever read besides the Urantia book. And these things are thousands of years old. They're literally etched in stone. And to see the correlation between the Planetary Prince story and the story of the Anunnaki, there's just too many comparisons to ignore. So if you're familiar with the Anunnaki story, the Sumerian tablets, or if you're not, I think you're going to learn a lot from this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe to Gary Lee Haskins' YouTube channel, Magma Sloths on IG. Also, go follow the Jazzy Fresh movement. My brother Joseph is joining us today at the bottom. He's provided us some of the intro music on some of our episodes. So, without further ado, let's slap this Anunnaki booty real quick. From the Urantia book, paper 66, The Planetary Prince of Urantia, the true story of the Anunnaki. The advent of a Lenonendeck sun on an average world signifies that will, the ability to choose the path of eternal survival, has developed in the mind of primitive man. But on Urantia, the planetary prince arrived almost 500,000 years after the appearance of human will. About 500,000 years ago, concurrent with the appearance of the six-colored or Sangic races, Caligastia, the planetary prince, arrived on Urantia. There were almost 1/2 billion primitive human beings on Earth at the time of the prince's arrival, and they were well scattered over Europe, Asia, and Africa. The prince's headquarters, established in Mesopotamia, was about the center of the world population. Okay, so it's saying right there that a Lananandex sun. A Lananandex sun is a high type of celestial being. It's like, I guess you would call him like a mayor or governor for a sector of the universe. And the Lananandex sun was in charge of our sector of the universe. Also, a Lananandex sun can be dispatched as a planetary ruler. They can serve in different purposes under different functions. Like Lucifer was Lananandex sun, but he was in charge of a bigger sector. Caligastia was also a Lananandex sun, but they put him in charge of a planet. So they can function in different types of roles. This Lananandex sun came to our planet. Usually the Lananandex sun, the planetary prince, on a different world, on a normal evolutionary world, they land the second humans evolve from the evolutionary struggle. So when a single cell organism evolves all the way up to man, the second man appears, it kind of sends off a bat signal to the universe and says, oh, there's will creatures down here. The planet's ready. When we pop up out of the evolutionary struggle, they'll send a representative down, and that is that first planetary prince. They say it usually happens directly when humans appear, but for some reason on our planet, he didn't appear until 500,000 years after humans appeared, which is a unique way to do it. I guess that wasn't the normal plan on a normal planet. So they waited 500,000 years before they sent the planetary prince, and they said there's already 1/2 billion humans on planet Earth. So we had been alive, evolving our own tradition for 500,000 years. That's kind of gnarly.
Apparently, a lot of things weren't normal about our world.
Yes, a lot of things aren't normal about our world. That's why 21st century society on Earth is so wacky and kooky, but it's unique, and you have to embrace it. Make the best of it. All right, number 1, Prince Caligastia, who is Anu from the Sumerian tablets. Caligastia was a Lananandex sun, number 9,344 of the secondary order. He was experienced in the administration of the affairs of the local universe in general, and, during later ages, with the management of the local system of Satania in particular. Prior to the reign of Lucifer in Satania, Caligastia had been attached to the Council of the Life Carrier Advisors on Jerusalem. Lucifer elevated Caligastia to a position on his personal staff, and he acceptably filled 5 successive assignments of honor and trust. Caligastia very early sought a commission as planetary prince, but repeatedly, when his requests came up for approval in the constellation councils, it would fail to receive the assent of the constellation fathers. Caligastia seemed especially desirous of being sent as a planetary ruler to a decimal or life modification world. His petition had several times been disapproved before he was finally assigned to Urantia. So for some reason, he really wanted to be the ruler of an evolutionary planet, and he got his petition denied 5 times. And finally, on the 6th time, they're like, all right, they gave him Urantia. Well, lucky us. Should be sketched out on this fool. He keeps trying to become a god of a planet.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, and another little quick side note, if I don't want to dive too deep into it, but so planets arise out of normal celestial dynamics. Stars, planets start revolving around each other, and then the planets get seeded by life. There's a theory called panspermia out there, where that first single cell that started all of evolution hitched a ride to our planet on a comet. This is a hot topic, a hot concept in science and astronomy at the moment. But the Urantia Book is going farther and saying that it wasn't just a willy-nilly random comet that brought this first cell. It was actually beings that brought the first cell. And that's how it happens on every planet. But it says that there is a normal evolutionary template that the over-controllers of evolution use to evolve planets. But what is it, every 10th planet, Magma, or every 100th planet? I forget what it is.
Yeah, every 10th planet is a
every 10th planet is a decimal planet, and the life carriers are allowed, the life carriers and the Lananandex suns are kind of allowed to, modify the template,
Experiment.
experiment with the life pattern to see if they can generate new types, new resiliencies. Like elsewhere in the Urantia book, it says that our healing mechanism is like at the time of creating us was like one of the most fastest healing mechanisms that they were able to create in the cosmic history of our
Yeah.
sector. And when they
So they're
realized,
still trying to they're still trying to perfect these patterns, I guess.
yeah,
With each new world they see life onto, they take what they learned from the last one and
yep,
try to tweak it a little. And I guess that explains the sheer diversity we have, like in our oceans and stuff. I guess we got a lot of unique creatures
yep,
you wouldn't find on other worlds, and it's worth noting. Um, every single world is different. Like even humanoids, evolve from different animals, or maybe don't even use iron in their blood, but copper or something like that.
yep.
Pretty much like Star Wars or something. But there's probably patterns of similar animals. Like you might see an alien elephant or an alien snake. But our world has like some unique animal patterns you wouldn't even see anywhere else in the galaxy, apparently.
Well, yeah. So our planet is a life modification world, an experimental planet. We are known as a decimal planet, where they try out new things. Like you said, you tweak the pattern to see if you can make it better. Apparently, we have such a good healing mechanism, like our blood cells proliferate around the cut really quickly and heal the wound. And they were able to use this that they learned from us and implement it in the next life planet. This says that there's already 6 or 7 other planets being seeded since 1930 or something like that. Where like 606 out of 619 planets, and I think like up to 612, 13, and 14 are getting ready to get seeded. So maybe they just got seeded.
Pretty wild to consider. Like millions of years go by until a world is actually ready.
Oh
So
yeah,
after these millions of years, another planet might finally be past this like lava ocean stage, and it's cooling off, and they're like, all right, this one's
this
about
one's
ready.
getting ready. Yep, this is just ripe. Let's plant it on. So that's what they're talking about when Caligastia
It'd be like the
was,
5 days.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep, and that's what they're talking about with Caligastia getting denied. He kept trying to petition to be one of the rulers of one of these planets that where people just pop up for the first time. He kept wanting to go on that mission. He got denied 5 times, but finally they're like, all right, just give it to this guy, give him Urantia. So moving on. Caligastia went forth from Jerusalem, which I think is in Orion's belt. That's my speculation. I pulled that from the Keys of Enoch, but it doesn't say that anywhere in the Urantia book. Caligastia went forth from Jerusalem to his trust of world dominion with an enviable record of loyalty and devotion to the welfare of the universe of his origin and sojourn, notwithstanding a certain characteristic restlessness coupled with the tendency to disagree with the established order in certain minor matters. So he was already a problem maker, not listening. He tended to not.
A little bit of a rebel.
Yeah, exactly. He tended to disagree with the established order. I was present on Jerusalem when the brilliant Caligastia departed from the system capital. No prince of the planets ever embarked upon a career of world rulership with a richer preparatory experience or with better prospects than did Caligastia on that eventful day 500,000 years ago. One thing is certain. As I executed my assignment of putting the narrative of that event on the broadcasts of the local universe, I never for one moment entertained even in the slightest degree of any idea that this noble Lenonendek would so shortly betray his sacred trust of planetary custody and so horribly stain the fair name of his exalted order of universe sonship. I really regarded Urantia as being among the 5 or 6 most fortunate planets in all Satania, and that it was to have such an experienced, brilliant, and original mind at the helm of world affairs. I did not then comprehend that Caligastia was insidiously falling in love with himself. I did not then so fully understand the subtleties of personality pride. Interesting. So this paper is given to us by a being. The being who wrote the specific paper was one of the beings who created this narrative of events for the broadcast of the entire local universe. So when this was actually happening, he was like the director of production for it.
I guess at the end it says presented by Melchizedek.
Oh, Melchizedek connected. Damn, it's pretty high being. So Melchizedek wrote this.
So Uh, Gary, are you wanting to take the next one and then I'll follow?
Yeah,
Cool.
the prince's staff. The planetary, excuse me, the planetary prince of Urantia was not sent out on his mission alone, but was accompanied by the usual corps of assistants and administrative helpers. At the head of this group was Caligastia, the associate assistant of the planetary prince. Caligastia was also a secondary Lenonendek son, being number 319,407 of that order. He ranked as an assistant at the time of his assignment as Caligastia's associate. The planetary staff included a large number of angelic cooperators and a host of other celestial beings assigned to advance the interest and promote the welfare of human races. But from your standpoint, the most interesting group of all were the corporeal members of the prince's staff, sometimes referred to as the Caligastia 100.
That'd be the Anunnaki. Uh,
Word.
These 100 rematerialized members of the prince's staff were chosen by Caligastia from over 785,000 ascendant citizens of Jerusalem who volunteered for embarkation at the Urantia adventure. Each one of the chosen 100 was from a different planet, and none of them were from Urantia.
See, that's pretty cool. So the 100 staff members were already ex-dead mortals from other planets, and they were on the Urantia worlds. And then somebody's like, "We got a mission to go to Urantia." 785,000 people volunteered, and they only picked the 100. So that could be one of our jobs when we get up there. When we die and get to the mansion worlds, they could send us to another planet to be part of the staff to help usher in, spiritual ages and caveman planets.
Hmm. And if I got that right, if there were some citizens, they already got through the entire Mansion World Ascension program of like all 7 training spheres. You go up, so that who knows, that could have been like 1,000 years of afterlife experience
Yeah.
before you kind of get to that central world. Then you kind of put it all on the line to go back down and plunge back into the material world for this kind of primitive animal adventure.
Hmm.
It's risky, but must have been exciting.
These Jerusalemite volunteers were brought by seraphic transport direct from the system capital to Urantia, and upon arrival they were held
And
enseraphimed
seraphimed.
until they could be provided with personality forms of the dual nature of special planetary service, literal bodies consisting of flesh and blood, but also attuned to the life circuits of the system.
Pretty interesting. They
Yeah.
explain more about that later in the book.
Sometime before the arrival of those 100 Jerusalem citizens, the 2 supervising life carriers resident on Urantia, having previously perfected their plans, petitioned Jerusalem and Adentia for permission to transplant the life plasm of 100 selected survivors of the Anton Infanta stock into the material bodies to be projected for the corporeal members of the prince's staff. The, the request was granted on Jerusalem and approved on Adentia.
Yeah, that's wild, right? So 100 survivors of the Andon Fanta DNA type, they took DNA, they extracted DNA from those bodies and used that to create the 100 staff bodies.
Yeah, I mean, does that correlate with the sons and daughters of man? The Nephilim.
It does after a point, because I think initially they don't have what, like, procreative prerogatives or something like that. The way they put it, like they can't reproduce, or they're not allowed to reproduce, because it'd be cheating. But I think after a point we'll find out they find a way to kind of break that rule.
Yeah, and in the Sumerian tablets, the depiction, I'll put it up right now, of the creation of man, and there's that DNA helix.
Well, where'd your hat go, Gary?
It didn't work with the headphones.
Uh,
I
it won't
mean,
fit around him, I guess.
we can make it work. Deadrick got it to work, but
Okay,
It wasn't worth it. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
check it out. I'm putting it in the voice channel chat right now. Picture. We'll put it up for the people.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that's on the Sumerian tablets, and you kind of see like the double helix in there. That's a depiction of the creation of man.
Interesting.
Do you know what that says? Because that's the language, right? Around it, that's their cuneiform.
Yeah, I can't read cuneiform. We'd have to drop that into AI because I think AI can translate it. But
can it really? That would be cool.
Yeah, so it's pretty sick.
Wait, you can't read cuneiform?
No. What? You can't read cuneiform?
Come on, bro.
Wait, me?
Yeah.
Or all of us?
All of us. No, it's just so you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
y'all can't read cuneiform? What?
Look at here's another depiction right here. Elsewhere and found in Babylon. So yeah, there's a bunch of different depictions of the creation of man, and it's all had to do with like a helix and people, shit like that.
Yeah.
It's a trippy image.
Yeah, and that's directly from.
But it was like one. It was kind of like Adam with the rib.
That was the next thing I was gonna say. And Adam and Eve with the rib. I think this paper actually goes into that story. It talks about that, how it survives in our current day Bible through the Adam and Eve story, where Eve was created through the rib. It's kind of like they took the DNA out. They'll explain it here more. Let's keep
going. Okay. Accordingly, 50 males and 50 females of the Andon and Fonter posterity. Fonter.
Yeah, see, fucking Bostonian.
But that's the opposite of Bostonian.
But I used to know people like Ideer, and they say like Anner, and that was when I was in New England. I don't know why. It's like A's, they flip the ER sometimes.
Yeah, it's like it doesn't make any sense, man.
Flip to A's.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. Accordingly, 50 males and 50 females of the Andon and Fonta posterity, representing the survival of the best strains of that unique race, were chosen by the life carriers. With one or two exceptions, these Andonite contributors to the advancement of the race were strangers to one another. They were assembled from widely separated places by coordinated thought adjuster direction and seraphic guidance at the threshold of the planetary headquarters of the prince. Here, the 100 human subjects were given into the hands of the highly skilled volunteer commission from Avalon, who directed the material extraction of a portion of the life plasm of these Andon descendants. This living material was then transferred to the material bodies constructed for the use of the 100 Jerusalemite members of the prince's staff. Meanwhile, these newly arrived citizens of the system capital were held in the sleep of seraphic transport.
That's wild, right? And we talk about that a lot in modern day UFO abduction cases. People taking genetic information, hybridization. It's for real. The aliens came down and genetically modified us and created bodies for themselves based off our genetic information. So maybe that's why they extract DNA from people. If we're just going that far out with the tinfoil, maybe that's why they're taking DNA on a UFO, because they can create a body with that they can inhabit.
Makes sense. It's like cloning. These transactions, together with the literal creation of special bodies for the Caligastia 100, gave origin to numerous legends, many of which subsequently became confused with the later traditions concerning the planetary installation of Adam and Eve. The entire transaction of repersonalization from the time of the arrival of the seraphic transports bearing the 100 Jerusalem volunteers until they became conscious, threefold beings of the realm, consumed exactly 10 days.
Do you know what that means? Threefold beings? You know what they're referring to there?
Yeah, I think they have mind, body, and spirits, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like they didn't have physical bodies before.
Dalamatia, the city of the prince. The headquarters of the planetary prince was situated in the Persian Gulf region of those days, in the district corresponding to later Mesopotamia.
All right, I know it's just the first paragraph, but I do want to bring up the fact Mesopotamia was taught to all of us, remember, when we were young, as the first civilization, the first city to appear out of nowhere, the according to history.
Mm.
Göbekli Tepe kind of threw a little wrench in that, but that was after we were younger. That was kind of recent when they started talking about Göbekli Tepe. But the first city
Yeah.
supposedly appeared out of nowhere. We were hunter-gatherers before that, and then overnight we had like
Civilization.
advanced agriculture, astronomy, civics, ethics, trade, science. We have knowledge of the stars and constellations. So we went from hunters and gatherers and all of a sudden like an advanced city state. That doesn't make any sense. That how does that even make sense, I guess?
Yeah.
And then the first city, do you remember the name? It was called Ur. U-R. Ur. And
Up
Urantia.
in
Yes.
Turkey.
Yeah, the city popped up because Celestials landed and they had all the knowledge. So that's why that Mesopotamian, Sumerian, Ur civilization appeared. They were descendants of Celestial. That's why it pops up out of nowhere. And then Ur, Urantia, we're reading the Urantia book. That's the real name of our planet. They knew the name of our planet. So they made a city in honor of the name of our planet, the first city, Ur. And that's where we get the name Earth,
Oh wow, I didn't make that connection.
Yeah, so now,
It's
and
it's
you
pretty
also,
well.
yeah, and then Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden was where? In Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, the land between the two rivers. So all of that, why is that all in our biblical, Sumerian, all the ancient myths? Why do they point to that area? Because the fucking extraterrestrials landed and set up shop.
What's Havona?
Havona, that's an extremely
In
high level of the universe. That's like you're talking the first layer outside of paradise.
it kind of sounds
Yeah.
like heaven, right?
Yep, that's
Yeah. So I'll give you a real quick kind of rundown of it. Is there's this idea of like a nuclear universe and then like cytoplasmic universes, and so outside of that kind of nucleus, we have these 7 super universes. Our super universe, Orvonton, I believe would correlate. A lot of people disagree with this. I have different ideas of it, but I believe it lines up almost perfectly with the Laniakea supercluster that was discovered by the Hawaiians in, I believe, 2016. Look at it as this massive, tremendous structure in space of constellations of stars. So the like center of uh, the inhabited creation is like somewhere way out there, but um, it's also worth noting like the grand universe is the inhabited universe, just
Right.
inhabited by deity permeating with personality. But then there is a uninhabited, like stretches of space that go way out beyond that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, um,
so yeah, if you know the Muslim
it's
tradition, they call it
I,
heaven,
I always am
paradise.
wearing the
In
three
Islam,
concentric circles. Paradise, I think some
I'm not wearing mine right
say,
now. It's
I wear
down
it.
there.
I always
He's
when I
talking about the necklace, the 3 concentric circles,
oh yeah,
The Urantia symbol. Yeah, that's supposed to. The first circle is supposed
was
to
it.
represent paradise. The second is supposed to be what, like Havana, paradise, Havana system. If they're the outer universe. Um, yeah, you could look at it like that. There's many ways to look at it, but yeah, it's funny that the term heaven sounds like Havana. We get a lot of terms like Jerusalem, Eden, Edentia. Uh,
I only knew about that because of Jocko. He was the reader. He was in the band Weather Report.
okay, he talks about
oh
Havana.
cool,
Have a called
Oh, that's right. That's a song called Havana.
oh nice,
But yeah, so all those
oh
beings, those fools, they landed in modern day Iraq, Baghdad, Iran, Mesopotamia, Sumeria, Babylon, Acadia. Um,
cool.
the Canaanites, the Hittites are kind of descendants of them. Yeah, that's all in that Middle Eastern region. And ain't no peace in the Middle East, dog. They be fighting over that shit.
Oh, that,
potentially.
They're trying to
there's
claim those centers for themselves, and that's why
yeah,
the Muslims
that's
and the Jews fight each other.
that's what was so cringy about seeing ISIS like deface all those monuments, breaking down statues and stuff
Mhm.
that were totally ancient because there is like the history of our species is kind of lost in the Middle East, but it's dangerous now that you can go and explore a lot of that.
Yeah, I like the cool theory is the reason why we invaded Iraq in the first place is because Saddam Hussein found celestial technology from the prince's staff and we figured out that
I
he
like
got
that
it,
they
so
got
we
it.
invaded. That's my favorite story. That's
That's
how I
why
That
like
the
it.
was the
pyramid
weapons of
weapons
mass
are.
destruction.
Yes, that was the weapons. That was the real WMDs. Exactly.
They leave it to obscurity.
But yeah.
All right. So,
Oh, well, and before we do that,
paragraph.
sorry. When we did invade Iraq, the very first camp that we set up was over the Babylonian ruins, and there was an archaeological team there that was like really hush hush, and you couldn't really talk about it. And no one knows what they were doing, but there were people on base during that time, and they said like it was all ancient ruins. The archaeological team came in and then like took everything away. Two of our friends, Mason and Justin, were stationed at that camp. Remember, I talked to them about that because they were there in the
Yeah.
very beginning of the invasion. They're like, "Oh yeah, that camp was there," and it was directly over Sumerian ruins. And like they shut it down, and they had like these military archaeological teams coming in, excavating shit, and then they like cordoned it off. I always thought that was interesting. Whatever.
Yeah, man. I wouldn't doubt wars have something to do with that.
Oh,
They have something to
Yeah.
do with
Now I'm
stuff
going.
that is beyond the news.
Now I'm gonna go even
Yeah,
deeper.
beyond what can even be disclosed. Not to mention, this is a bit of a rabbit hole, but wasn't Saddam Hussein trying to build Babylon? He was trying to rebuild Babylon or something like that.
Yeah, he engraved on the actual Babylonian gates where what's that fool's name? Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
Like where he was like the great Babylonian king. He had it engraved like here is the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, the whatever, the son of God or whatever. And then Saddam Hussein went in there and inscribed his own name under it and said, "This is the castle of Saddam Hussein,
Yeah,
son
yeah.
of God," like right under Nebuchadnezzar. So he tried to make himself seem like he was the next lineage of the Babylonian king, Sumerian kingship.
Yeah, it was really weird strategically that he ended up dumping a bunch of funds into restoring these ancient ruins and trying to refurbish them, give them a fresh coat of paint, and I believe they ended up spending a lot of their money at doing that instead of strategizing. Um, but I don't know. There's some.
Have you guys seen that video of the body of Nimrod supposedly?
Yeah.
Oh,
You've seen that? Okay, you've seen that video,
yeah,
right?
I know what you're talking about.
In the
Do you
edit, I'll
think that's
pull it
real?
up. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it right now on YouTube, but it's like glitching
Mhm.
out for me, so I'm not gonna play it, but I'll play it in the actual.
Who's the
an
guy
actual
that his
video.
name started with an E?
With two?
And
We're not.
Enki and Enlil. We're
Enver
gonna
the
get there.
Hunter?
Yeah,
Or
Enki and Enlil. Yeah. Um, but okay, so that video with the Nimrod, just the guy, the mummy sitting in that sarcophagus. Supposedly, they found like the body of a celestial, and he was still preserved perfectly. Me and you watched it together, Magma.
Mm.
I guess when that video came out, that's when we declared war and we invaded within like 2 months of that video.
Mm.
Yeah, and the
Mm-hmm.
guy who released that video is a legit archaeologist. You can find his name. He's still alive, but he's like really like hush hush and doesn't talk to the media. But he was like over there trying to find Sumerian artifacts. Supposedly found that body, and that video was real.
David Roberts?
Yeah, as that might be him. I don't know, but he like a month after he found
Dave
that,
Roll. I
we
think Dave Roll.
yeah, a month after we found that body, supposedly that's when we invaded. Just throwing out all the conspiracy theories. But he wouldn't be a staff member. He would be a descendant of the Caligastia staff. So he would have celestial blood in him.
In I guess some kind of stasis. I've heard this pop up in various weird ass esoteric texts like what was it? The ancient secret of the flower of life, I think, and there's like the emerald tablets, I think. There's these recurring themes of these beings like who can live for extended periods of time, but then they put themselves in like some kind of sleep stasis or something like that where they're I've heard about supposedly Tibetan monks doing this where they slow down their heart rate to a point where they're still technically alive, but preserved.
Yeah, like the cells don't divide as quickly. It slows down the division process, but it's still there. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's actually physically possible, but
No, I mean neither. These are just fun shit to talk about.
yeah.
Throwing all the data points and just barfing them on the table and trying to connect the dots.
So I'll just start from the top here. So I got through that one sentence. The headquarters of the Planetary Prince was situated in the Persian Gulf region of those days, in the district corresponding to later Mesopotamia. The climate and landscape in the Mesopotamia of those times were in every way favorable to the undertakings of the prince's staff and their assistants, very different from conditions which have sometimes since prevailed. It was necessary to have such a favoring climate as a part of the natural environment designated to induce primitive Urantians to make certain initial advances in culture and civilization. The one great task of those ages was to transform man from a hunter to a herder, with the hope that later he would evolve into a peace-loving, home-abiding farmer. The headquarters of the Planetary Prince on Urantia was typical of such stations on a young and developing sphere. The nucleus of the prince's settlement was a very simple but beautiful city enclosed within a wall 40 feet high. This world center of culture was named Dalamatia in honor of Caligastia. The city was laid out in 10 subdivisions, with the headquarters mansions of the 10 councils of the corporeal staff situated at the centers of these subdivisions. Centermost in the city was the Temple of the Unseen Father. The administrative headquarters of the prince and his associates was arranged in 12 chambers immediately grouped about the temple itself. The buildings of Dalmatia were all one story except the council headquarters, which were 2 stories, and the central temple of the Father of all, which was small but 3 stories in height. The city represented the best practices of those early days in building material, brick. Brick. Very little stone or wood was used. Home building and village architecture was among the surrounding peoples were greatly improved by the Dalmatian example. Near the prince's headquarters, there dwelt all colors and strata of human beings, and it was from these nearby tribes that the first students of the prince's schools were recruited. Although these early schools of Dalmatia were crude, they provided all that could be done for the men and women of that primitive age. The prince's corporeal staff continuously gathered about them the superior individuals of the surrounding tribes, and, after training and inspiring these students, sent them back as teachers and leaders of their respective people.
Let's see, that's a cool chapter of history I want to review after we die, and we get to go back and look over all like the history that we couldn't see. For one of the first things I'm going to go look at Jesus' life, and I want to know these stories right here. Like it says, around the prince's headquarters, there dwelt all colors and stratas of human beings. So like, just think about all the different races, and they're all on the outside of the fucking temple, and they're getting trained, and they get sent back to their people to establish more legacy buildings like us.
Oh, that's been really cool.
And those
They're legacy buildings. I see.
that history would be a cool chapter to actually review. That'd be sick. Like, what did this
So
red
that's
guy do? What did
different
this black
people.
guy do? What did this Asian guy do? Didn't he go like get after who was like the killer and all of them? Like who was the weakest? What guy was a piece of shit? Like, I don't know. Yeah, now you're making me think that maybe like there was a normal human that got trained in the headquarters, and that human was, got trained really smart from birth, from young, got sent out back into the cave people, back into his people, but he's now trained by the Celestials. When he reaches those people in the woods and starts helping them out with all this knowledge, they might look at him as like a special person and record it as if he's like some god or some
There's stories of
progenitor.
that.
Yeah, right.
Messengers that come.
Out of nowhere,
They
and they're
give
human,
knowledge.
like, and they give knowledge. So maybe it's just a
My
human
guy
that was
is
trained, and not an actual
recording, so
celestial.
you're-
It's what's the guy's name? The Aztec Quetzalcoatl.
Okay, yeah, some
I
story
was
like that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, just like the story of the guy came and gave people knowledge.
Yep, exactly like that. Or
Oh,
maybe
there
Merlin,
needs
like
to be
Merlin.
this connection.
Oh yeah,
Merlin's a
it's an
good one.
archetype.
Yeah.
It's an archetype within us.
Yeah, I
Power
wonder if we
gets
could
there,
find
like-
archaeological evidence of this, like go find these chambers, the mansions, the subdivisions of 10 and 12,
It's
or do you think they're just destroyed by
what is
And with that
Yeah,
long
well,
ago,
yeah,
what, 500,000
yeah,
years ago?
500,000 years ago? That's a long time. That'd be sick though.
But
it was
everyone,
all fake, you know.
I mean, they just discovered Göbekli Tepe in what, like 2015 or 2014 or something like that. It's decently recent, and it goes way deeper than they thought. You know, they found this site. They kept digging and found like it goes somewhat deep, and it doesn't make sense in the time period it was. I forget when it was. It was like 30,000 years ago or something like that. It's a long ass time ago, and so it's like it looks like a trading hub for hunter gatherers, but it doesn't make sense. Like all this architecture, these giant animal statues and stuff like that. Like, what's that doing there?
Yeah, and
That's just one example.
our time frame is way
You
off
might
too.
Makes
Like our actual history, like humans are a lot
Mm.
older than our science currently thinks. We're 1 million years old. Civilization has been around longer since 6,000 years ago. Now Göbekli Tepe is pushing it to 12 to 30,000 years ago.
Yeah, that
But
that was it. Yeah.
like they keep thinking Sumerians were only 6,000 years ago. No, the last of the Sumerians, maybe the last descendants were 6,000 years ago, but
Mm.
Caligastia landed 500,000 years ago. So civilization's been around for 500,000 years. It's crazy to think about.
It's amazing the stories passed on through oral tradition that long and managed to survive.
Yeah, so when people think, currently people think the Sumerians were 6,000 years ago, and then Göbekli Tepe pushes that farther back, but we know that's wrong. We know Göbekli Tepe is more of an Adamic outpost. Adam and Eve were way later than Caligastia, you know.
But yeah, more like what 15.
For what?
Trying to think the time frame of Adam and Eve's bestowal on like the second garden and all that.
It's like,
Oh,
I
it's
know
more
they
like
landed, what, 37 or 47,000 years ago?
yeah, it was a little more recent, like
Yeah.
20,000, something like that.
Yeah. Within the last 50,000 years was Adam and Eve, and then 500,000
Yeah.
years ago was fucking Caligastia. It's a long time between celestial incarnations, but it's kind of interesting. We don't think that civilization's that old when it really is that old. I mean, it wasn't everywhere. Most of the people were primitive cavemen. Civilization was only really around where the celestials were. And I guess like the talk of the entire planet was there's these beings that have civilization out in this spot in the middle of the world, and like everybody tried to kind of, it was like a mystical experience. They went on the hunt for a journey to find this headquarters where the supposed celestials live. You know, if you heard about this story in the middle of the woods, you'd be like, that's bullshit. Ain't no godly civilization. And that's where we got all of our myths, all of our tales, all of our legends, that the Atlanteans, there's these special people out in the middle of nowhere. If you find them, they have high technology, you know, and they're gods. So that's where
you gotta get lost to get found, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
true that.
So, all right, I'll keep reading.
Mm.
Or early days of the 100. The arrival of the prince's staff created a profound impression. While it required almost 1,000 years for the news to spread abroad, those tribes near the Mesopotamian headquarters were tremendously influenced by the teachings and conduct of the 100 new sojourners on Urantia. And much of your subsequent mythology grew out of the garbled legends of these early days, when these members of the prince's staff were repersonalized on Urantia as Supermen.
That's right there. That's what we were talking about.
Yep.
The garbled legends.
Straight up, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
I'm gonna give you guys another legend. You ready for this one?
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
The 101 Dalmatians.
Oh my gosh, dude, every time I hear that, I'm like, where are the
100
Dalmatians?
Where'd they pull that
Yeah.
number out?
Exactly, 100 Dalmatia? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I think about that too. I'm like, what the heck? Is it a coincidence, or is this guy a Urantia Book reader? And like,
That's too much of a coincidence,
right?
man. Like, come on.
The 100 Dalmatians, right?
On that note, dude, just a quick aside, like the Disney Atlantis movie, and the Atlantis logo is like almost like the concentric circles, but it's a spiral, you know, and there's like some little hints in there. I
Yeah,
don't know. It's
yeah, I need to go watch
maybe,
Atlantis again.
But
I heard
who
there's
wrote
some
the book in the first place?
the Urantia
From
Book.
an alien, right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it's technically
what?
Somebody
aliens.
controlling. It was like an alien. It's probably the same alien that was controlling these Disney writers and stuff.
It was Walt Disney. He wrote the Urantia Book.
Walt Walt
Dude, I mean,
Disney and
it's a
L. Ron
movie
Hubbard.
now. You know what I mean? The book's so good. But you know,
Yeah, if we looked into
story is
the
good.
origins of like where these stories came from, that would be interesting.
Yeah, we should and see like how
it'd be
accurate they are and shit. Forbidden Scrolls reading. We're gonna read the Sumerian tablets too. We're gonna go side by side with this shit. Okay,
group.
so moving on. You're
Group
breaking up hella
consensus.
hard right now, Joseph.
Yes, we're losing
My
you.
bad. I'm
Good. The serious obstacle to the good influence of such extraplanetary teachers is a tendency of mortals to regard them as gods. But aside from the technique of their appearance on Earth, the Caligastia 100, 50 men and 50 women, did not resort to supernatural methods nor superhuman manipulations. But the corporeal staff were nonetheless superhuman. They began their mission on Urantia as extraordinary threefold beings. 1. They were corporeal and relatively human, for they embodied the actual life plasma of one of the human races, the andonic life plasma of Urantia, from Andon and Fonto. These 100 members of the prince's staff were divided equally as to sex, and in accordance with their previous mortal status. Each person of this group was capable of becoming co-parental to some new order of physical being, but they had been carefully instructed to resort to parenthood only under certain conditions. It is customary for the corporeal staff of a planetary prince to procreate their successors sometime prior to retiring from the special planetary service. Usually this is at or shortly after the time of the arrival of the planetary Adam and Eve. So they were instructed not to have sex with each other, or at least not to have kids with each other. They were instructed not to procreate. Yeah, because, they're fucking. They were instructed not to procreate until Adam and Eve.
The house.
Yeah. So they were going to wait. They usually have to wait until Adam and Eve, and then they're allowed to crank out babies, and then they leave, and their babies stay. These special beings, therefore, had little or no idea as to what type of material creature would be produced by their sexual union, and they never did know. Before the time for such a step in the prosecution of their world work, the entire regime was upset by rebellion, and those who later functioned in the parental role had been isolated from the life currents of the system. In skin color and language, these materialized members of Caligastia's staff followed the Andonic race, so they looked like Eskimos. They partook of food, as did the mortals of the realm, with this difference. The recreated bodies of this group were fully satisfied by a non-flesh diet. This was one of the considerations which determined their residence in a warm region abounding in fruits and nuts. The practice of subsisting on a non-flesh diet dates from the times of the Caligastia 100, for this custom spread near and far to affect the eating habits of many surrounding tribes, groups of origin, and the once exclusively meat-eating evolutionary races. So they saw the Celestials only eating fruits and nuts because they had special bodies created for that purpose. The humans saw that, and we started copying them because that's what humans do. And that's where the origin of veganism and vegetarian comes from.
Yeah, I got to make a quick note here because I'm currently going through a fascinating book about Kellogg cereal. It's the Kellogg, John Harvey Kellogg, and I guess as he kind of refined Seventh Day Adventism, I guess that was one of their beliefs. Particularly, one of his beliefs was a strict vegetarian diet. He speculated that was why some of these ancient beings you encounter in like the Sumerian Kings list and the Bible, Adam and Eve, and all that, were able to continue living is because of their health and because of their diet. And he speculated that a flesh diet is what like starts to age us because we use too much energy or something like that. Yeah, kind of an out there idea, but
yeah, it's out there.
Yeah, it's out there. I don't believe it.
Yeah, well, the Urantia book doesn't say it. It says that we were created to eat meat. Only the Celestials, their bodies were specially composed.
There's this Stone Ape theory, and only mammals that are carnivorous experience psychedelics or have like a trip. Like you can, yeah, only carnivorous mammals are the ones that have psychedelic hallucinogenic effects from them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I never heard that before.
I haven't really seen the test or method. I
haven't seen the test or nothing.
I hear, and I believe it.
Yeah, I think it has something to do with our MAO inhibitor in our gut. Like,
yep.
Because if we didn't have that, we'd eat lettuce and start tripping because there's DMT and everything.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe the herbivores always tripping, dog.
I go both ways.
The animals are. Sometimes I feel like that. I'm like, dude, what are these?
They're like staring at you and shit, all fucking tweaked out.
They're just tripping balls.
All right, I'm gonna keep going. To the 100 were, well, before I keep going, I already said it once, but we weren't created to be vegans. All right, number 2. The 100 were material but superhuman beings, having been reconstituted on Urantia as unique men and women of a high and special order. This group, while enjoying provisional citizenship on Jerusalem, were as yet unfused with their thought adjusters, and when they volunteered and were accepted for planetary service in liaison with the descending orders of sonship, their adjusters were detached. But these Jerusalemites were superhuman beings. They possessed souls of ascendant growth. During the mortal life in the flesh, the soul is of an embryonic state. It is born, resurrected in the Urantia life, and experiences growth through the successive Urantia worlds. And the souls of the Caligastia 100 had thus expanded through the progressive experiences of the 7 mansion worlds to citizenship status on Jerusalem. So they had already gone through the mansion world regime, but they hadn't fused with their thought adjuster yet. And when you go on a mission to come down to a planet like they did, you leave your thought adjuster up there. So when they were on our planet, they were adjusterless. These beings previously had a thought adjuster, but they left it on the Urantia world for some reason. And I think about that concept a lot. It's weird. It's almost like an anchor point. It's like a save, you know? It's like your adjuster
Oh,
always saves your level in the universe. So I'm going to leave my adjuster at this high level. I can descend back down, but my real level's up here, and I can pull me back whenever I need to, you know? It's like a save
okay.
point.
Well,
Like you save your point, you know?
that makes sense because I was under the impression it was risky for them to leave their adjusters behind and come down here because then it's like if you die, you're dead kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
you're detached from your adjuster, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's like you can just respawn on Jerison where you left off or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I look at it. I was like an anchor.
Mm.
Yeah, we got you. All right. In conformity to their instructions, the staff did not engage in sexual reproduction, but they did painstakingly study their personal constitutions, and they carefully explored every imaginable phase of intellectual, mind, Urantia soul liaison. That's interesting. Like, what were they doing? Like tantra? Like, yeah, exactly.
Well, what are they implying
Yeah,
there?
exactly. Every imaginable damn, that's
They
normal.
did not engage in sexual reproduction, but they did painstakingly
Study their personal constitutions.
constitutions.
That's a great
Carefully
way to put
explored
it.
every imaginable phase of Michael and Urantia life and liaison.
Interesting.
Wow.
Must have been freaky in Dalamatia at night.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I guess that's the origin of tantra. That's what. This is where the boat gets a little weird.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
I mean, it's an interesting concept to really think about, you know? Like, damn, they're using their instruments and mechanisms in ways we're too immature to, you know, because of our taboos.
What does that mean? Intellectual and Urantia liaison. It makes me think. I don't know if you've seen this 1970s animated movie called Fantastic Planet, and there's like these little humans, and they're on an alien world of these giants, and the humans are like little pets to these creatures. But there's a scene where they're going off to meditate, and these beings like come together, they start meditating, and their bodies like start reaching into each other, like these veins, and, like having some spiritual tantra where they're like ectoplasm is floating out, and that's like yeah, that's their Urantia liaison. It makes me think that's could have been where they got that, I guess.
No orgasm in the astral.
Something like that. Yeah, they meditate and like go up into each other and stuff.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what that is and what that means. And I often think about that. Like, how would you put it? Like when you feel that sexual energy and you want to have sex with the person, you know, everybody knows that kind of thing. You know, it's that strong feeling and sexual sweat and the kissing each other and all that shit. And that's cool. And you can kind of like get better at that, right? But now let's think about like what's a perfect mental or Urantia liaison? Like,
or something just physically animals procreating, but there's some kind of higher spirit.
Exactly. Can we get to that point of relationship, of loving each other like people do physically? Can we get to that point mentally? Like where, you know, you guys are conceptually on the same page at all times. You know what I'm thinking. I know what she's thinking. I know that she's in it for the legacy and she's trying to build the kingdom. She knows I'm trying to build the kingdom. And we just kind of vibe, flow. Yeah, exactly. And I wake up in the morning and I'm going to go, you know, record a video while I cook some breakfast. She gets up in the morning, does this shit, and we just have like a perfect working synchrony of thinking and
Psychedelics.
and I guess achievement through goals, hobbies, just different type of
So
ways of painting, making videos, and like to the point where your minds are so close and you're
yeah,
seeking the same spiritual values. That is that possible? Can something get created? I don't know. Can you
I,
somehow have
I agree.
intercourse like that?
Well, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, like, I think that's one thing that's interesting about this life we live is getting old. Eventually, you get to a point where you're not so sexualized anymore, but the
Mm-hmm.
person you're with, you have higher reasons to be with each other if you're still together, you know. And
Yeah.
now, you know, to live your life, you have to become completely dependent on routines, especially as you get older. It's not as easy to labor so much or any of that. So, um, it is those routines and those patterns and those habits that you form your entire life that finally you start kind of reaping the fruits from that in order to.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You're right. The physical mechanism starts to diminish and it forces you into the other parts of the triad, the mind and the soul. I wish we
Mm,
could exercise that as much as we do with our physical intercourse, you know. That'd be real cool. Maybe we can make
mm,
midwayers, and I doubt it. All right, moving on. And it was
moving on.
during the 33rd year of their sojourn in Dalamatia, long before the wall was completed, that number 2 and number 7 of the Danite group accidentally discovered a phenomenon attendant upon the liaison of their Urantia selves, supposedly non-sexual and non-material. I like how they say supposedly. So like,
Supposedly.
and the result of this adventure proved to be the first of the primary midway creatures. This new being was wholly visible to the planetary staff and to other celestial associates, but was not visible to the men and women of the various human tribes. Upon authority of the planetary prince, the entire corporeal staff undertook the production of similar beings, and all were successful, following the instructions of the pioneer Danite pair. Thus did the prince's staff eventually bring into being the original core of 50,000 primary midwayers.
It's not a midway creature.
Mm.
It is interesting, though. It seems to imply there is some convergence of forces, some convergence of cosmic forces that happens between that unison between two personalities
Yeah.
that a third one can be made. Um, it's interesting. I don't know. It shows that like animal procreation is the most material, mechanistic way you can develop a life form to preserve itself and its lineage throughout time. But on a spiritual level, maybe time and lineage is irrelevant. Generations are irrelevant, and it's more of a fusion of two like spiritual qualities or personalities that generate some kind of new form.
Yeah, and like in conformity to their instructions, the staff did not engage in sexual reproduction, but they did painstakingly study their personal constitutions. They carefully explored every imaginable phase of intellectual, mind, and Urantia soul liaison. That's what you're kind of focused on right there. They did not engage in sexual reproduction, but they painstakingly studied their personal constitutions and carefully explored every imaginable phase of mind and soul liaison. And it was during the 33rd year of their sojourn in Dalamatia, long before the wall was completed, that number 2 and number 7 of the Danite group accidentally discovered a phenomenon attendant upon the liaison of their Urantia selves, supposedly non-sexual and non-material, in parentheses. And the result of this adventure proved to be the first of the primary midway creatures. This new being was wholly visible to the planetary staff and to their celestial associates, but was not visible to the men and women of the various human tribes. Upon authority of the planetary prince, the entire corporeal staff undertook the production of similar beings, and all were successful, following the instructions of the pioneer Danite pair. Thus did the prince's staff eventually bring into being the original core of the 50,000 primary midwayers. So apparently these beings were doing some type of tantra or something like that. I don't really understand exactly. We were trying to figure out what they mean by a non-physical liaison, or supposedly non-physical, non-sexual liaison. Um, I was explaining kind of like, the passion you get. We all get carnal, sexual passion, right? Like this feeling of intimacy, sweating, sex, orgasm, all that stuff. Very physical, very intimate. But how can you get to that same point mentally or spiritually? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Can you get into a perfect, like harmonious way of thinking with the opposite sex? Like when I'm joking, and this is a lame example, but maybe this might be a really low example, but flirting, or just when you really click with someone, or if you're talking about something deep with like a girl or something and you guys both get it and you're like, wow, this is interesting. Or you have a vision of what you want to do, and then you look at her and she completes your sentence for you and she can see the vision that you already have, and that kind of makes you happy. That makes her happy. Can you keep expounding upon that? Can you think another thought and think another thought and think another thought and seek values in your daily life? I'm just trying to figure out what this not supposedly non-sexual liaison technique is to create midway creatures. Like, how do
Well,
they do that?
so it's worth noting as well that somehow when they did this, they created these midwayers. They weren't just normal human beings.
Yeah,
I noticed the two moments, like looking at it from a broader perspective, if we're to kind of look at all these papers together, this kind of midway creature creation event happened twice in the history, supposedly, and it was right after the Caligastia staff of 100 came down, and all that, and right after Adam and Eve came down, in these two different historical events. But in both moments, it's like these the celestial realm is touching down and making contact with us. So some about that, there's like a high surge of energy and some kind of like because of their constitution of having this like high surge of energy, when they come together, it's like there's some kind of convergence of forces um, that I think maybe in a normal human being procreation sense, that's like a very like low voltage or something like that of forces that come together to in the inception of a child, but maybe like with such a high voltage, I guess, of like these celestial beings having just come down and they're pretty much pure line celestials. Maybe it's like um uh, it's kind of mind boggling to try to comprehend that,
Yeah.
I
So
guess.
do tantra while thinking about Star David and your chakras, and you'll create midways.
Do midwayers have bodies?
Yeah, they do have bodies.
Completely.
They do have
Is it
bodies.
I
like
guess.
a physical body?
These are the primary midwayers that were created by Caligastia staff. Then there's, like you said, a second event of the secondary midwayers that were created by Adam and the descendants of Adam and Eve. Um, the secondary midwayers apparently are pretty much, they're just us, but they can phase in and out of reality. That's how I perceive them. They're human beings, but they can kind of disappear at will. The primary midwayers, I'm under the impression that they're more just like, you can't see them. They're more in like the ethereal, spiritual
Yeah,
dimension. And I'm sure they have bodies. If we're
but just
gonna,
not like ones that we could see.
not physical bodies, they're like astral
Yeah.
bodies, like the body you have when you're dreaming, when you look down and see your body, your light body. Um, there's a unique and obscure extra Urantia book source text that's called I call them the Midway Papers, but it's written by a guy named George Barnard, and this is an interesting guy in Australia who supposedly met the Midwayers, and he recorded it, and he wasn't a Urantia book reader. They supposedly told him about the Urantia book. He at first thought they were dead spirits. um he thought it was a dead Indian because it looked like a red man, like an Indian guy, and he kept appearing to this guy in the outback in Australia, and he thought he was witnessing a dead Native American spirit, and it looked just like him, but it could phase in and out. And he said it addressed himself as ABC 22, which is how the Midwayers name themselves. They have designations with ABC, then the number. And then he goes on to have a bunch of these contacts with him, and it takes like 3 or 4 contacts for him to finally accept the fact that, holy shit, I don't think this is a dead person. I think this is an actual being. And then supposedly ABC 22 brings, fuck, I forget the other number, like ABC, DCE, a different number, and it was like a blue woman. And they said like
Oh,
the secondary midwayers, I guess there's a lot of them, and they all correlate to one of the red, orange, yellow, green, blue races, one of the evolutionary races of color. So there's like black midwayers, Asian midwayers, red midwayers, blue midwayers. And he goes into it deep and says that they work for 23 hours a day on duty doing like celestial services, and for the 1 hour a day they all meet up in like the center of the middle of nowhere where they don't reveal it because they don't want humans to know where they meet up, and they all like kind of party and have their own culture. They've been alive forever, they don't die. They kind of just are the intelligent service for the celestial beings. But yeah, it's a cool little read. I'll put the link in the description. Maybe one of these days we can analyze it for the Forbidden Scrolls. But
Didn't
according
the
to George
Romans, like
Barnard,
when they took
they look
over,
like humans. Yeah.
they turned them into like the amphitheaters, or they put on plays and stuff, right?
For what?
Like they turned those places because they found like the natural like like sound amplitude, like people could put on performances and stuff, and you could hear it from a mile away. And when they started colonizing and everything, I'm pretty sure they took those and they turned them into like plays for the king, queen, and all that.
Interesting. I don't know. You're still breaking up a little bit. I didn't hear
Yeah,
everything you said, but
It'd be difficult to
It's
catch
fun.
that.
yeah. So I'll put the link in the
Um,
description for the George Barnard paper. But
I shared an image in a voice text. That's still what I want to believe midway creatures look like. I'm on the fence if they look like necessarily well defined, like genetic human evolved from primates. Like they might be some
that
more
picture.
basic primal humanoid form. I also saw some cool artwork made by someone, but I can't find it at the moment.
So they
Um,
discovered a way to produce a being without a sexual encounter, right?
Supposedly.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, man. I mean, think about it in a way like when we create beings out of ideas, out of information. Like we've created beings like Luke Skywalker. That is pretty much a real person, but it's not real as in like I can go meet him, but it's real in all of our heads. And other
that's
characters like that, like memes in a way. But it's probably to a greater extent, It's probably something that is a being that is of information that is beyond the body that they have tapped into somehow.
Have you heard of like a toper or a topa or whatever they're called?
No.
It's like a myth or a legend. I forget which tradition, which culture. It says that like thought forms. If people think them for a long time, they can become their own entity, and they can be like bad or good.
oh,
It's
interesting.
called,
Yeah, so I think it's along those lines too. And they somehow
Yeah.
figured out a form of creation on that has to do with what we just described, information, and maybe it's between two people too. It's almost like when they tell a story. Maybe a story has to be told, just like how we tell stories and we create characters out of those stories. And that in a way is like how we create the beings. But it's probably to a greater extent, right? This is probably a very simplified version that we're talking on here. It's probably along those lines, but I think it has to do with that. It's like beings that are like of just information in a way, or of light, of a substance that isn't of the material body.
Yeah, right. Able to
I can
incept
see that.
personalities into reality, but not physically. Actually, just in the astral plane.
Yeah, something like that.
I shared a couple more images of an artist's depiction of what midwayers could look like.
Wow, dude, that why are they holding a puppy? Is this a joke?
Yeah, see, that's
I don't know.
for me.
Dude, it's gotta be a joke. Why are they holding a cat and a puppy?
Oh, there's a lot of
So
people out there.
this artist saw these two old photos of these little kids and decided to paint over them, so that's why.
Oh, okay.
But, oh, that one. Yeah. That's fucking weird, dude. I don't know.
Can I
That's
just
all.
do that?
That's weird, dude. That person needs to see a therapist.
Yeah, there's certain art forms, there's certain representations that I see. I'm like, and it resonates with me. That one,
No, not so much.
nah, that one don't. You know what really resonates with me is Alex Gray. Like if you Alex Gray's paintings, it's like wow.
That's how I picture them. That's how I picture them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or like, yeah.
very geometric.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And maybe like if you see him phase into the reality, you see like their skeleton appear first, and like the arteries and the flesh appear. I don't know, you know what I'm saying? And then
Yeah,
they
yeah.
materialize right in front of you. You're like, holy shit, dude! I just saw you go from like cells and then they disappear the same way. I don't know.
Mm.
But yeah, that's how I tend to look at them too, out spirit type beings. But yeah, so these are the primary midwayers. One of my pet hypotheses would be that the midwayers can lift big objects. They have the ability to lift heavy stones, and that maybe that's one of the ways that they were able to build pyramids. That they employed the help of the midwayers to levitate these objects because humans couldn't do it. But
That makes sense.
These mid-type creatures were of these mid-type creatures were of great service in carrying on the affairs of the world headquarters. They were invisible to human beings, but the primitive sojourners at Dalamatia were taught about these unseen semi-spirits, and for ages they constituted the sum total of the spirit world to these evolving mortals. So the humans that lived around the headquarters, they knew about the midwayers. They were taught about them. It was a normal thing to them. It was like, okay, there's midwayers. And on a normal planet, that's how it is. People are like, yeah, there's midwayers. Of course. We're the only ones that are ignorant of them. Like it's a fairy tale.
It's so egocentric.
Yeah. So that'd be cool to live on a planet where the midwayers are just like normal. Like, what's up, homies? What's up? You invisible? Yeah. That's what's up. So, number 3, the Caligastia 100. Oh, what's up, Dangerous Dragon Dude? Sorry for the non-acknowledgement. My soul sister, my sister in Christ. Welcome. You know how we do. We're recording right now, so if you got anything cool to say, drop it. Okay, so moving on. Number 3. The Caligastia 100 were personally immortal, or undying. There circulated through their material forms the antidotal complements of the life current of the system, and had they not lost contact with the life circuits through rebellion, they would have lived on indefinitely until the arrival of a subsequent Son of God, or until they're sometimes later released to resume the interrupted journey to Havana and paradise. These antidotal complements of the Satania life currents were derived from the fruit of the tree of life, a shrub of Urantia, which was sent to Urantia by the Most Highs of Norlashadek at the time of Caligastia's arrival. In the days of Dalamatia, this tree grew in the central courtyard of the Temple of the Unseen Father, and it was the fruit of the tree of life that enabled the material and otherwise mortal beings of the Prince's staff to live on indefinitely, as long as they had access to it. So that's gnarly. That's a little bit of insight on what the tree of life is, like the Adam and Eve story where they're eating from the tree of life. It found its way into our Bible. They're saying
that image you shared earlier of the ancient Sumerians. That was what they were depicting there.
The tree of life. There you go. That's exactly what they're.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Fuck yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So they're partaking from the tree of life. They're saying that this was pretty much a cosmic shrub, a plant from a higher sphere from Urantia, and that this plant in the chemicals, it had the antidotes for everything that caused us to age. But it only worked if you had a special body that was fitted for it. A normal human being could not eat that and live forever. It only worked for the staff.
So I guess like as plants photosynthesize the energy of the sun, a celestial entity can, in a way, like panel in the circuits of its body some kind of cosmic energy that surges and propels you forward. But like as a material being who's like as they put it, a Superman, you're like mostly material, semi-spiritual. You might need to like almost like improving the alkalinity of your body, like change the chemical conditions of your body to better like allow this cosmic energy to surge through you or something like that. And that's what this special Urantia allowed them to do, I suppose.
Yeah. So they have specially created bodies that allowed them to eat this shrub of Urantia that allowed them to live indefinitely. While of no value to the evolutionary races, this super sustenance was quite sufficient to confer continuous life upon the Caligastia 100 and also upon the 100 modified Andanites who were associated with them. So I guess this freak, remember how there was 100 people that they took the life plasma from to create the Caligastia? Deadrick, go downstairs.
Baby Deadrick.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about? Why are you saying your own name?
Yeah,
So
you're like pulling my microphone and shit. So yeah, so they took the DNA out of 100 people, 100 Eskimo-looking people that were Inuit-looking people that were on planet Earth. They took that 100 DNA samples and created 100 bodies for the Caligastia staff, the Anunnaki. And then they took the DNA from those 100 humans. They also somehow injected the complement into their DNA for the Tree of Life. So also the 100 humans, they could live indefinitely off the Tree of Life as well. Those 100 humans were made assistants to the Caligastia staff. So like say I give my DNA to create a body, whoever's body that gets created, I am not his assistant. So I'd be the assistant for that staff member. And then they made it so that I can also eat the fruit and live forever. Because I got upgraded, I guess, because I'm an assistant, I guess. So while there's no value to the evolutionary races, yeah, it works for the Caligastia 100 and also upon the 100 modified Andanites who were associated with them.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. It also worked on their like contributors, I guess.
Yeah. So Amadon can eat the fruit. It should be explained in this connection that at the time the 100 Andanites contributed their human germplasm to the members of the prince's staff, the life carriers introduced into their mortal bodies the complement of the system circuits, and thus they were enabled to live on concurrently with the staff, century after century, in defiance of physical death. There it is right there. Eventually, the 100 Andanites were made aware of their contribution to the new forms of their superiors, and these same 100 children of the Andon tribes were kept at the headquarters as personal attendants of the prince's corporeal staff. And for right now, yeah, let's leave off on that. And let's pick this up for the next episode. Some closing thoughts. This, after just listening to the Sumerian tablets written or read by Billy Carson, this lines up line by line. It's the most detailed depiction of what actually happened back then for the Anunnaki creation story. We were just looking at the pictures of them talking about, the creation of man through the double helix depicted on the wall of Sumeria. Also talking about the Tree of Life.
You guys should check out Dave Roll. Dave Roll, it's like released on YouTube. The Odyssey, I think, is the page.
Dave Roll.
They've got a whole thing on this. Just look up the Tower of Babel, and it's like 3-hour video, but it's pretty. It feels like an eternity trying to understand the data.
That's pretty legit. Yeah, I gotta check that out. Hopefully, we put that link in the description. I don't know. It's just dope. That's just crazy to think that ETs came in the past and modified us, how they created their own bodies. Because no one really talks about how they create their bodies. This is telling you it's like a scientific extraction of DNA to generate physical bodies. And how this all happened at one of the most war-torn areas on planet Earth,
Oh, I think I might have found it. The Tower of Babel and Other Great Mysteries. It's like a 2.5-hour video. Odyssey. Okay, yeah, I found it. Yeah, a great resource I would love to mention is this website, firstlegend.info. If you want to deep dive into the whole Sumerian myth and Anunnaki and how it ties into the Urantia book, there was this guy who's an actual like historian, anthropologist. He's got real technical lingo and jargon to kind of go into it, all the charts of migrations and all that.
He lived in Egypt from like historians in Egypt. He was like originally like a music producer or something like that.
Oh,
And then
okay.
he got into history. He gave up music for history.
Nice. Well,
Now, are we descendants of these genetically modified? Like everyone has the DNA of these
yeah.
modified beings, right? Every single human being.
No,
Maybe.
because there's only 100 of them, and whoever they mated with, I guess.
But at this
Sure, that
point, like
I mean, at least in
we're
a
just a soup of DNA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're just like a soup of mating at this point. Like
I'll
the
say
races,
maybe.
like how can like there's got to be unless you're like extremely isolated, you got to have some of this DNA, right? This was so long
Yeah,
ago in quite literally
In
the
order
center
to
of the world.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so as it was spread out, all of us have to have this within us, right?
I wouldn't doubt it. If most of us
Possibly.
had some,
I mean, there was possibly, I'd say there was more than 100 people. There's like, they said 500 million people on the planet Earth. They're mating too at the same time that these 100 people are mating, and I think that would kind of water down the gene pool. It would kind of
Well,
drown that out. I don't know if it would go the opposite way, as if we would get all of their genes. I think more so or likely. Like, you really think so? You think it's been that long enough time where, like, because even if you dilute that genetic lineage water all the way down, say that takes 100,000 years, say that takes 500,000 years.
I would say, yeah.
and that's
Why
yes
not?
and
You
no.
think so?
That's
You think eventually we reach that point where everybody has like 1% of it?
two colors.
Yeah, but more of us have it than others. More races, I don't know which one, but more people, depending on where you were located on the globe,
Yeah.
probably have it than others.
Yeah.
And the ones that have it more than others are ones that were most likely just located more toward there. Groups that didn't venture out from Mesopotamia.
Yep. And
I
now we're
would
getting
consider
into the
that
most
too.
controversial part of the Urantia book.
Yeah, yeah. It
Some
talks about the lineages
the
and all that. But like,
Nazi Superman, who's the descendants of the Aryan race.
oh yeah, yeah.
Well,
They're all into the
we're actually talking about that now. Where does the word Aryan come from? Sumerian.
Well,
Sumeria.
Sumerian.
So Hitler was trying to literally do what we're talking about now. Try to figure out who had the most blood of this celestial blood and then re-amalgamate that race. That's why you only
But the thing is, that's kind of open to interpretation because the actual Aryans didn't actually have blonde hair and blue eyes. It was like North India, like some tribes north of India that were like the actual Aryans back at the time. So it's kind of like
he
you can take those ancient
confounded
teachings
it.
and kind of bend them to fit whatever mold.
Yeah, he
your
conflated the concept very.
your
if I ever
gender.
meet in flesh, he better look, or it better be better than anything I've ever seen before. Because I mean, this shit it's a joke. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
I would imagine, but
yeah, and we have like what 8 or 9 different. It says we have 8 or 9 different races or DNA on our planet currently, and they're all just one big soup mixed together. So you could have blood from the Caligastia staff. You could. It said that there were people of all colors that lived directly surrounding Dalamatia. And we haven't gotten there yet, but we go to the rebellion. When the rebellion happens, the staff breaks in half. The leader of the positive staff is Van. The leader of the negative staff who went to rebellion was Nod. These represent Enki and Enlil in the Sumerian epics, sagas, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, epics, I guess you would say. Legends, myths, yeah. So Enki and Enlil. Enki was Van, the leader of the positive staff. The 40 that stayed positive, and 60 went negative into rebellion, and that was Enlil. And they were always fighting each other for the planet. That's what the Sumerian tablets talk about. One that happened, I think the 60 rebels, correct me if I'm wrong, Magma. 60 rebels, I think they started mating with the humans. I think they said, fuck it, we're in rebellion. We're going to break the rules. We're going to start fucking the humans. And that's
that was the story of the Nephilim.
Yep, and that's the story of the Nephilim, the mighty men of old, when the daughters of God went to when the sons of God went to the daughters of men. So if every type of colored being was around Dalamatia, and then they decided to go fuck the human beings, there could be half celestial, half black person, half celestial, half yellow person, half celestial, half red person, and that would be in the immediate surrounding area of Dalamatia. Some people could have Caligastia celestial blood. Then we also have to remember the same thing happened with Adam and Eve. Adam fucked what, like 16,000 girls or something like that?
Apparently.
Yeah. Had over 16,000 children with different women. we could also have blood from the Adam and Eve celestials. So yeah, it's hard for us to understand who has more blood, and the Urantia book says not to fixate on this because it's not that big of a deal anymore. Everybody's so admixed at the moment that you can't really figure out who is more pure line celestial.
Infinite.
We all, yeah. So I guess depending on what, like you said, geographic location you are in, that would dictate how much celestial blood you do have or what type of celestial blood you have. Are there beings here that have 1 or 2 more % of all of it? Like, I don't know. Who knows? Some people like all the tinfoil hat people, they think like those are the king lineages, the royal,
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
bloodlines. Supposedly
Yeah.
they are trying to.
But that's probably still so muddled anyway.
Exactly.
That's probably still so
yeah.
diluted.
The Illuminati bloodlines.
Yes, exactly. That's what it is.
Like monarchs, like the literal, which yeah, I guess you could say is Illuminati, but like the classical kings and queens
Yep.
that we see, the bloodlines.
Yeah, they claim to be descendants of these
That could be.
celestials.
At this point, though, what I can tell you is we are all anatomically modern humans, and we do have similar capacities for being able to learn and being able to work. So I feel like at our current genetic state, we could still make the world a better place. That's really
Amen.
awesome.
There's
Amen,
still
man.
demons and
I'm gonna put that picture of us, all the people holding
say,
hands, different colors around the world.
repetitive
But okay, these bloodlines, the Anunnaki bloodlines, the monarchs and the kings and the queens who are currently alive today. Possibly that's why they inbred, to keep that blood
Yeah.
pure. Which is
Oh,
kind of fucking crazy.
That's probably still so like that's probably still not pure though.
No,
yeah.
no, dude. I would love to be able to scan the planet and see who has the most, like who is that Aryan
Well, think
Superman.
like what people you think probably have the most? It would probably be Middle Easterners, right?
Yes,
Unless
I agree with that's the Persian.
the group that has the most migrated to another area and isolated in their own way in that area. You know what I mean? Like the people that you would think have it now in Mesopotamia
Maybe
are
they
actually ones. They're just remnants that don't actually have it. When maybe the people that actually have it migrated to other areas and became Aryan.
Oh, I can't wait.
they had
No,
enough.
we're gonna in the next couple of weeks. We're gonna read the Andite not migration papers. There's like 4 or 5 papers that talk
Yeah.
about that specifically, and it said like they split into 4 factions. One went north, one went west, one went east, one went south to create these types of people.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds like the Hopi prophecy of the Hopi Native Americans. They have like the 4 corners and the different
Right.
races that were named 4 corners.
Yeah, spread into 4 corners. Yeah, I
but-
guess one of the offshoots is the Hindu religion.
Yeah, it's got to be. That's the oldest religion.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
one the descendants of Caligastia staff migrated west. They established what we consider the Indian Hindu religious type of system.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then remember some of them went north, or some of them stayed in Baghdad and created the Babylonian Akkadian kingdom. Also the descendants of the staff, which have really got interested in this part. I think it said some of the descendants of the staff also mixed with the Adamites, and they went to the island of Greece, and that's why you get
Oh yeah, Crete, right?
Crete, yeah, and that's how you get
Yeah.
like another civilization based off the Adamic celestials as opposed to the civilization based off the Caligastia celestials.
You know what? You're right. I think probably the people with the most pure bloodline, if you want to call it pure, are ones that were physically isolated. So that's what you would have to look for.
Okay. Yeah.
And most likely, too, I would have to throw it out there, maybe even Native Americans, because they were isolated on their own continent. So I don't know. They might be too far off. Like they might have traveled a little too far. But I'm just thinking in terms of like physical isolation that would keep bloodlines pure.
Well, okay, Gary, I'll give you this. It talks about what we're just
I don't
talking
know how
about
you
is
tap into these concepts. Like like your mind is piercing in to the knowledge somehow.
Yeah.
Piercing the veil.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about here is the Nodites. What like that bloodline ended up forming like its own race was the Nodites,
Yeah, that's
which
remember they call them Nodites
currently
because they're
extinct but
descendants of Nod.
went down. Yeah, and then you got the Adamites, which 50,000 BC. You got like the Adamite bloodlines, and from what I understand, that trickled down into a few different groups, particularly the like Mediterranean kind of region, the uh, Japanese ended up getting
Oh,
some of
yeah.
that, like Neanderthal and yellow. The Peruvians, interestingly enough, because
Oh,
apparently a group had traveled through Polynesia and ended up landing in South America.
Yeah.
That
oh,
was why Peruvians were a little distinguished, I suppose, in their culture.
yeah.
And then,
In Mayans as well. Like if you go to
Yeah.
Guatemala now, you can see how they're very distinguished. So it's
Yeah.
probably it's still so muddled though. Like it's still so like how would you even identify that Japanese, Peruvians, and Greeks all have the same bloodline? That makes
yeah,
zero
right.
sense.
Sound like Graham Hancock. Um,
And then like the like Nordic races, and then like sub-Saharan Africans,
yeah.
like the Dogon tribe and stuff like that. So it's like it's kind of interesting that you got like these very disparate groups, but you're right, it's very muddled at this point.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be interesting the Celtic, like UK,
Ooh,
like the island.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
they most likely have some. I know even David Icke has that idea that the UK has something to do with the Illuminati bloodline, but I don't want to go down that
Yeah, I think that's
rabbit hole.
some type of Adamic outpost or descendants of Adamic, something with Merlin, the UK, the Celtics, that
An
dynamic.
ambassador.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like that whole lore of the Celtic mythology too. That would be interesting to analyze, like the gods of the Celtic region and how they relate to the Babylonian, Sumerian gods.
Hmm.
Probably similarities, but yet they're so
Probably.
distant.
Yeah. And then
I did
it's interesting how the high celestials, when they landed in Peru, it says they established the lineage for all the kings in South America. So like they kept it in their bloodline again.
Mm.
It does say that the red man unfortunately was cut off from the Adamic and
Oh,
staff.
so I was wrong. Well, then how did Peru? How did it happen in Peru?
Well, okay, so the red man went to the Bering Strait, came to America, and then established the Native American Peru, Aztec, the red man over here.
Yeah.
And then the descendants of the staff and Adamites, the Nodites, like Magma was talking, they came through Japan and island hopped, and they found them again. So they were already there. So the red man was already there millions of years or thousands of years, and then they landed.
What was it called, like Maui
That's
statue
interesting.
and all that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It says that Easter
Like
Island was their
Hawaii.
headquarters place. Easter Island was
Easter
their
Island.
headquarters. and
Wow,
they created
that
all
makes
this.
sense.
Yeah.
Going down to Peru and then founding like the Incan Empire and all that.
Yep. And then they founded the kings and the queen. So I guess they pulled more.
You know what?
colonization shit.
That's wild. Sorry.
No.
Think
yeah.
about like so the belief system of Northern Americans, Native Americans. It's
Yeah.
very earth oriented. They don't have. I mean, maybe they do. I don't know too much about it, but they don't really correlate with the multiple polyistic way of life. It's more just like a earth religion. But then you go into like you get into the South American idea. They are polytheistic. Yeah, they're polytheistic.
Yeah.
And that
You're
relates
right.
with the old Babylon times and Sumerian times. So that makes a lot of sense how North America was isolated.
Yep.
If you just look at their belief systems.
Yep. And then pyramids too. And they all say the same thing.
I don't know if that
beings from the sky came down and landed and fucked us. Like
one way or the other, they say that.
some ways are enjoyable, right?
Yeah. So that's I find all those correlations interesting.
I love that comparative religious research.
Yeah. Who has and it's funny because the Nodites, we call them Nodites because they're descendant of the Nod section. When the Caligastia staff split into two, like I said, the leader of the rebel staff was Nod, and then he started fucking humans with the staff members, so that's why you consider them Nodites. But did the Vanites intermix with the humans too? Magma, do you remember? I don't remember.
I haven't got there yet because it's been a while since I've read these papers, so I'm going back through recently, and I'm on like I'm pretty much around here. I'm at like the Adam and Eve papers right now, so I haven't quite got caught up.
So I don't know exactly off the top of my head if the positive staff did procreate with the evolutionary races, but you have to keep that in the back of your head that the Nodites were rebels and then they had sex with humans. So these were superhumans, that the babies, the offspring were supermen. They had celestial blood in them, but they were taught by the rebels. And that's a big, important differentiation. They might be like super, mythological legends, superhumans, but they were probably taught in a negative way by the rebellious members. And then hypothetically, I don't know if this is real or right, but if the positive staff members, Vanites, which I'm not sure if they did, if they mated with the humans, then that offspring would be still superhuman celestial DNA, but they would be taught by the positive side of the staff members, which were teaching that we belong to a cosmic organization. The rebels were teaching that the cosmic organization's bad. It's a totally different way of teaching. All right. Well, that was part 1 of paper 66 from the Urantia book, The Planetary Prince of Urantia, The True Story of the Anunnaki. If you're interested in the Sumerian tablets, the Epic of Gilgamesh, where a lot of the Old Testament stories come from, how they're copied from Egyptian older stories and older Sumerian stories, this is the text for you. This is giving you all of the precise details on what actually went down. A lot more to read because we only got halfway through the paper, so continue to follow the YouTube channel to keep up with episode 2. Subscribe so you can keep updated. I hope you're able to keep up with all the conversation. If you have any questions or if you don't understand anything, leave a comment. You can also join the Discord. I'm always in the Discord server, so if you have any questions, you can ask us directly. If you have any suggestions on something you want us to read and analyze, by all means, again, join the Discord and we will analyze that text in the Forbidden Scrolls way that we do. Again, subscribe to my brother Gary Lee Haskins. All of our social medias will be in the description. Until next time, keep it forbidden, baby.